I did that before starting my business. And that kind of actually started into like motherhood. So I work with sensitive, intuitive women, most of them mothers. They don't have to be though, to, be able to work with them who I feel that are emotionally like overwhelmed, burnout, disconnected from their voice. And most of the time when they think that there's like a strategy issue in business, it's usually nervous system. And because our nervous system is our home. So I work a lot, like I said, with mothers, and it's always reflected back to me. It always comes up in like, I'm having this problem with my, spouse or, another relationship in my life or my kids. And it's always comes right back into nervous system. So everybody can find me. I'll make sure that you have my link tree and that has my podcast they can listen to. My podcast is called The Enlightened Misfits. And all my links or social media, they can just type in Lauren Perlingi or The Mermaid Light and they'll find me on YouTube, Facebook. I'm starting to get more on Substack and LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can find me on all those platforms.
Thank you for sharing all of that. First question for those who are wondering, because sometimes I wonder this myself, what is conscious parenting and how does it apply?
So when I say conscious parenting, it isn't about being gentle or calm all the time. Or people hear like gentle parenting. And then often I hear, well, my kid's not gentle. Like I hear you, either is mine. It's about really understanding what's happening in your body before you respond. Same thing when it comes to your child. What is happening in their body before they respond? Because to be honest, the reality is our kids are a mirror of just like I'm a mirror of my own parents' parenting. And it's like I decide, we all have to decide, are we going to continue that pattern, toxic or not, right or wrong? It's not coming from that place. It's more of coming from like, what do I personally want? Like, do I want to continue this pattern that, I learned from my parents, or am I going to consciously choose to do something different? So I feel like for me, that's what conscious parenting means.
I think that's a wonderful explanation. For me on the outside looking in, think of it as okay, parenting, whatever that means, and conscious, whatever that means,
Yeah.
to the person, because it can mean different things to different people. But ultimately, from my understanding, is that you're equipping parents in waiting, new
Mhm.
parents, or seasoned parents, just say, hey, these are additional tools for your tool belt for your children. Would that be accurate?
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So I am smart.
Yes, yes, you are.
So why did you get involved in this type of work?
So, that's actually a really good question. So I would say the moment that I had my daughter, fast forward to, I feel like I need to give a little bit of like a backstory to, why it kind of pushed me into like really kind of coming into, parenting because I am a parent. It is an identity. Like I am a mom. So it's like I needed to come into that, kind of step into that role. And I think before I became a mom, or I guess when I was a mom, like, a newly mom, like a newer mom about 6 years ago, um, I had a lot of postpartum depression, and I realized through now looking back, I realized I suppressed a lot of my emotions when I was a kid. And like rightfully so, to keep myself, obviously not knowing what I was doing at the time, to keep myself safe. And I started to notice that pattern in my daughter of that moment that like maybe she wasn't listening, or how my nervous system felt being unsafe and like in maybe in my environments, and I started to see that pattern show up in my daughter. So I've always been really intrigued with astrology and human design. So I was like, you know what, let me look at how human design can support parents or children. And, understood my human design, and I understood my daughter's human design. And I realized that it was that pattern that kept showing up about how was I responding versus how she was responding? And, fast forward to today that we're all designed differently and how we respond is we're always making decisions, right? Like every single day we're making decisions. And seeing that pattern through my daughter, because I am somebody that sees patterns. It's literally like instinctual, like, oh, I see a pattern. Like so it helps me kind of understand and use that as data. It's because it's all data. It's not like from a place of judgment. It probably was at some point, but getting back to your question, basically, I started to notice that healing through understanding myself had to come first. And that's kind of like where I started in the beginning. And then fast forward to today, I use it all the time because I'm looking at her, looking for patterns. She's a mirror to my own nervous system of like what she's showing me and how can I best support her through myself without if it's like self-abandonment or like through my own self, coming back to myself and then mirroring that back. And that's kind of like how that works. And I think that in the beginning, I was not aware of that. So, like, nobody really, being a parent, it's like there's no book that you can read about parenting. It's more about how you can navigate your own identity.
One thing I've noticed about parents in waiting, like people who want to become parents, is that the enthusiasm, for the most part, is through the roof. I can't wait to be a mom. I can't wait to be a dad. I can't wait to be a parent. The child comes out and they're like, oh my God, Lauren, what the hell did I sign up for? I just don't know what to do because now you're not only responsible for yourself, for your relationship, for
Yeah,
your other partner, now you're responsible for a newborn child, which has different expectations, has different needs. This is 100% your responsibility.
right.
You mentioned that there isn't a book, and sometimes I go on Amazon and it's like parenting 101 or parenting for dummies. And it's like, well, I think I'm kind of smart, but yeah, maybe I'm kind of dumb when I try to take care and change diapers. But that identity shift that you talked about, what are some of the obstacles that you see people struggle with when now they're parents and maybe the world has to look differently because the world is viewing them differently?
Yeah. So, that's another great question. Thank you for your great questions. So, when I realized about motherhood, it wasn't about creating like a new wound. I don't know if you've heard people talk about like the mother and father wound. And I often feel like, for mine, my mother wound was very clear to me, or just patterns of like that was inherited or generational, through my mom or my dad, both sides, both lineages, both, in the same thing that it was like a full experience for me. And realizing that for me personally, I wasn't ever fully seen. So that showed up as, you know, yes, I thought that, the 9 months that, you prepare and it's like, it seems like, okay, now what to expect of like bedtime and resistance and like crying. And I look back now to like all the nervous system regulation that I, help other people with and I've done for myself that like I wish I would have known that then. Because and nobody really talks about that and that's why I feel like so called to talk about it because I feel like it'll help you just a little bit, just a little bit when it comes to those moments of your body feeling so out of control or your nervous system feeling unsafe and you know you're just trying to control everything and anxiety pops up or you're worrying about something tomorrow or you feel like you're depressed but depression to me just means that you have suppressed emotions and anxiety is simply you're thinking about the future and you need to stay in the moment and I think that when you're raised in homes where their emotions weren't safe or talked about, or maybe even being loud was like danger, or crying just meant you were weak, our nervous systems like get interrupted in like a normal child behavior as like a threat. So like my daughter is very loud. Uses her voice and navigating all of this through my parents' generation, my mom always had something to say about it. My dad always had something to say about it. Other people have something to say about it. And it's more of like, the tools that I have created. Um, it's boundaries and the identity. It's like I'm shifting into somebody different. I'm now responsible, like you said, that responsibility for like another human. So like what can I do different? Like what I don't want I in the beginning I focused so much on not being my mom that I became her. And then I, focus more of like what did I like from my mom and how she parented and my dad and how he parented and what did I not like and like what am I gonna like let go of, accept and like let go. And that whole process is like, through general healing with yourself that you have to go through. And I think that that is like kind of the best way I can describe it, especially when dysregulation happens or this identity shift, because when you are shifting identities, it feels like you're losing a part of yourself, but you're not really losing a part of yourself. You're just allowing that part of yourself to kind of shift away and move away so you can kind of move forward. Because if not, it just stays in the way.
You mentioned the childhood experience, and some of us find out that we do certain things like our parents would, and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe
Yeah,
a part of me is like them, right? I'd always compare that to realizing that you need to take your mother and your father off the God throne, and then they put on their pants and their underwear one leg at a time, just like you.
right.
Sometimes they even jump to do it. When it comes to deregulation, how does emotional unavailability and emotional deregulation affect new parents and their bodies?
So, through my own experience through that, I realized that in the beginning, when my daughter would cry, I would feel no emotion to it. Like you would think, oh, I have to go soothe her, I have to go comfort her. But in my experience, that was not my experience because I was so disconnected from my emotions. And, through therapy and through a lot of my own healing and working with healers and all doing all the things, right? Doing my healing, trauma, all of that, I really understood that it was never really about, you know, it was about a story that was attached to this emotion of shutdown. And it's like, I remember when I would cry, I would immediately shut down. My nervous system would shut down because my behavior or however I was acting was a threat to my parents and they had to control it. So that repeated back into me of, or if it's like, stop crying, crying's not okay, or, all of that. And like those big emotions that if I, looking back now, if my mom would have just told me, anger, let's process it together. Like you're allowed to feel angry, obviously putting boundaries up, with expectations of like not hitting people, like stuff that is okay. Like we can have anger, but you can cry in the middle of the grocery store. And it was more about like I'm embarrassing her versus me. Like I don't get embarrassed when my daughter does that. I just let her do that. And then like she's fine. People look at me like I'm crazy, but like, you know, it's just like she's a kid. This is how she feels angry and she needs to get it out. And I think that through just kind of understanding that for, myself, especially breaking those generational patterns of like starting to regulate versus reacting because like kids are just reacting. Like they don't really know how to respond, like especially like I'm just talking about my daughter being 6. She doesn't really know how to not react. I mean, her conscious mind is not really there yet. It's more of like her ego. So, and we react out of ego. So, when you look at that and a pattern shows up, it's the acknowledgement of your parent, and then that teaches them, oh, I can have this big emotion. I have a tool to process it, or I have a tool to whatever that tool is, and then kind of, holding that awareness. And that again was not taught, I don't know if you're part of the same generation or similar generations. That wasn't taught in my parents' generation. And now I see it so because this generation of kids and like, maybe maybe 2 or 3 generations now, it's like they're not accepting it. They're coming in and they're like, nope, this is not what we're doing. And I love it because at the same time, it's like it's not people are doing, I can see it. It's a ripple effect of like all of us doing our healing. It's starting to really affect in our kids because that's what matters. It matters, their generation is what matters. I mean, we matter too, but we're the ones that had to stop, break that, some people call it generational curse. It's just, I call it generational patterns, stop it so it doesn't continue to, ripple effect all over in the world.
The generation that said stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yes, yes,
Uh,
yep, that generation.
that generation.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just
I
like,
remember.
okay.
Yeah, I remember those days, and you have to make a choice. It's interesting how they will say that, and as you become an adult, you still have to make that type of decision, right?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
either you do what you have to do or you're homeless. Either you do what you have to do
yes,
or you have food on the table, right? So I
yes,
think sometimes when we look back at certain things, we look back at it with today's lens versus lens from yesteryear. So, for
yes,
example, it made a generation of people that were very determined, very tough, but they're able to identify what they wanted for their kids and what they didn't want for their kids. Versus, I think the generation before us or two before us, they maybe didn't have that knowledge because there wasn't someone they can go to and talk to. But our generation, we can at least talk about it, and at least identify what was going on. And it reminds me when you mentioned the children being loud. It reminded me of this clip a couple of years ago where this child, I think it was in a grocery store, the child was yelling and the mother was yelling back. So you had the mother and the daughter yelling at each other, and people are standing like, "Oh my God, like what is going on?" Right? It was just this outrageous scene. But I think sometimes we forget that children don't know big emotions, small
right,
emotions, and
right.
everything in between. And sometimes parents who grew up that same way and didn't learn in their adulthood, they don't know big emotions and
Right.
small emotions as well. How do we help not only the children to identify both, but also the parents as well?
So I agree, and I agree that I was there about, I want to say about 7 years ago, of like when somebody was like, "Oh, you can have boundaries." I've healed, and I think it's going to be like an ongoing journey of people pleasing, of like, I'm responsible for your emotions. I'm responsible for making sure your moods are okay. I'm responsible for this because, like, that was what was shown to me. I was always trying to navigate my parents' moods, wherever I was, making sure that, like, I was safe. Again, like, we're all just trying to stay safe and, in survival mode. And until I realized, oh, I get to choose if I want that person around me, or I get to choose this versus that. Like, it was a big aha moment for me about 6 years ago. And I was like, oh, I don't have to do that. Oh, okay. Like, if somebody yells at me, I don't need to yell back. I can just stay quiet and then keep my power. And I think is like the most powerful thing, because as much as you want, like, we get triggered because all of us, I do believe that we trigger ourselves, nothing outside of, I mean, yes, there could be an external trigger that triggers you to get triggered, but at the same time, it's more of like your body's giving you different hints, and, like, hey, look at me, like, we need to, this is, you feel angry, maybe we need to look at anger and figure out why we're angry, detach that emotion from that story. And that's kind of where I birthed my 90-second method. So, and I'll go a little bit into like my 90-second method. It pretty much lets the emotional surge of that emotion move through your body before you speak. So, like, in 90 seconds, the first step is awareness. So, realize. The second step is neutral. So, like, breathing, it could be anything. And this is happening when I have people practice this is happening all in 90 seconds. However, it could last a couple minutes until you get used to it, or remind yourself to be like, "Oh, I need to do this." And then consciously you just do it. Now I just do it. It's not something I have to tell myself. But then the last step is re-choose, which is so powerful, because if you can get through that one moment of like, I'm triggered, so that's just the awareness of it, and then you pause, like that, like when they say power in the pause, it's huge, because you pausing when you're triggered instead of reacting, like just kind of like going after that person, because like that emotion of like just going after them is real. But then you get to re-choose. Am I going to respond? Do I need a boundary? Does there need to be a conversation? Um, and I mean, this is different for everybody depending on, I teach it in the lens of human design. So authority is basically how you make decisions. So depending on who you are and the energy that you hold, it's going to look different about how you regulate yourself and or all of that. But going back to this, I've this kind of birthed into the world because I was like, I need something that I needed that I used, through my own journey that could help anybody. You don't need to be a parent. It could literally just be anybody because we all get triggered and then nobody really knows what to do with it. They just kind of suppress that emotion because it's not safe to say, I feel this way, or you're doing, you know, because you did this, I feel this. And it's more of like that acknowledgement of you giving your own validation of like not ignoring your emotions because then they get really loud. And that's what happens when you ignore kids and their emotions, they get very loud until somebody notices them because any attention, negative or positive, a kid is going to, they don't know that it's a negative reaction. They just know, oh, my parent is listening to me. Oh, my parent is giving me attention. So it kind of actually like separates that too, because I noticed that within my daughter. I don't give her negative attention. I will not do it. It's just not something I choose to do. I will not argue and yell with her. Did I do that before? Yes. And then I would think to myself, I'm not arguing with this 6 year old. I'm just not doing it because I don't even, it's more like I'm arguing with my own inner child and my own 6 year old of like, what are we doing here? Because like I know right from wrong. Does she know right from wrong? Maybe a little bit, but she's still learning that too. So she doesn't know it's wrong not to argue. She doesn't know she knows that I'm her parent and, she looks up to me, but she also is still navigating all of that too. So it's kind of like that's where the shame comes in and that's where all of these patterns from childhood come in. And as much as I know I can't save her, I can also teach her to make sure that, she understands right now she doesn't really know what the real world is, but she'll have those tools to be like, people are mean because people are mean. It's just the reality of the world that we live in. And it's like, giving her that confidence of like when somebody calls her ugly, it's like, I'm instilling this confidence in her that I can't even give credit to where I seen it, but I seen it on social media, and it was this mom that she was teaching her daughter, if people are mean to you at school, and it's like I love myself. It's okay if somebody says, "Well, you're ugly," and it's like, what do we say, Lily? And my daughter's name is Lily, and she will say back to me, I love myself, so that's okay. So it's giving her that confidence of, or if like somebody calls her fat, and she'll say, I love my body, it's okay, I love my body. And like then there's no like back and forth interaction with the child because the child's probably thinking, well, what do I say next? They don't know what to say. They're just repeating what they hear at home or what they hear with other kids. So I think that has been really powerful for her because she is in kindergarten and she's starting to see, Mommy, there's kids at school that are mean. And I feel like that was when I started to incorporate this tool with her because she at least understands it to that, do people hate me versus do they love me? And she is kind of, it was also, reflected to me too when her family dynamic at home, her biological dad, she goes there every other weekend, but she doesn't really have any other interaction with him. He's very emotionally unavailable and he chooses to be that way. And he has his own journey of navigating parenthood. But she also has my husband, the guy that has been around in her life since she was 2.5. So she also has that kind of different, like I love my dad, but I also have, I always tell her, you're really special because you get to have, 4 parents and, you 2 houses. Most people just have one. I'm just trying to like help her understand that like she's not the reason why conflict happens. She's not the reason, because I often feel like when there's divided households, the child feels responsible for the adult problems.
I'm a product of divorced parents,
Mhm.
and my brother, my sister, they experienced that because my parents divorced. I was older,
Mhm.
so and I was out of the house as well, so it didn't impact me directly as much as it did those two. But they always felt a sense of responsibility when it came to the household being split.
Yeah.
Do you think parents maybe sometimes minimize the impact that a divided house has on their children and how the children feel responsible for that divide?
Yeah, in my perspective, I do because I feel like if I didn't figure out my own problems, issues, whatever I needed to do. And at the time, I didn't realize how it would affect her. Now, looking back on it, I have lived it. I see it in her. Um, I also promised myself when I did file for divorce and I did leave, it was a very unhealthy, toxic marriage and relationship. And it was part of my, I joke about it now, but I'm like, oh, part of all my bad choices. But now I can see why I had to live that to live this where I am right now. Um, but yeah, she's been asking questions about, for the longest time we didn't have communication because of just all of the abuse. And I decided to open up communication when I was more stable of like the emotions not so tied and intermixed and it was safer for me. I had to get myself to that point. So I'm not saying that, I know a lot of, dynamics now. It's hard to navigate that. And as a parent, and I feel like depending on where you are, or if you're listening to this, I'm not going to even say it's easy. And it's still not easy because it still forces me to figure out if I'm being triggered by him still, what am I not looking at? Like, where is the disconnect, or where can I, kind of strengthen my own communication, or, because I do try to be very neutral, and just have open communication because when that we didn't have communication, I seen that she would play both sides of like, well, daddy told me this, and I would be like, like I would just listen. And then I'm thinking to myself, I just don't, she would play, like I can tell my mom something and tell my dad something, and they'll never know. So I started to see that dynamic happen too until, showing her that we can have healthy communication, in, my own boundaries of how can we do this to help her. I always say this, I tell his girlfriend all the time, thank God for you, because she helps enable that of like that very strict line of like healthy communication and is, hopefully helping him as well understand that like I need to show up better as a father or, however that is for him. So I have to say through that, my daughter is less anxious lately because she realizes, oh, like at some point in her journey, she didn't think I knew her dad, which is interesting. But I also understand because she's never seen us together. I left when she was like 3 months old. So she doesn't understand, like she doesn't remember that. And I did that because it was just a moment of like the last final straw of like, I can't continue this. Not that I'm a product of a divorced parents, but looking back on that, if I had an opinion about it, my parents never should have been married. And they stayed together for us, which created so much more problems than if they just would have separated. And I don't say that because of like judgment. It just, I can see where there's parents that stay together for the kids and what that does to the kids versus what, break, like products of divorced families do to also the kids. And like I just always remind myself that all of us here have chose to be here and we chose these lessons. And as much as we're sometimes in those hard times or those, challenging times, that you are the person you are today because of what you've been through.
That's interesting because I will agree. Even though I look at like my situation, and I actually think my parents' divorce are about the time that they should have.
Good. Yeah,
Uh,
good.
right. And it was
Yeah.
interesting that I say that because I didn't grow up with my mother or my father. I was raised by my grandmother, rest in peace. But when I was
Yeah.
reunited with my parents, from my perspective, granted they could say something differently, but from my
Sure.
perspective,
Yeah.
things were all right. Maybe for the 10 years that I was actually with them, right? Because they divorced when I was like 19 or 20.
Mhm.
But from my perspective, around the time they got divorced was when things were getting bad. Like, when things are bad and you're like, okay, what's going on here? But when it's about to get really bad, they're
Yeah.
like, okay, we need to go versus dishes are being broken, whole walls are being punched, and
Yeah.
furniture is being thrown through the air. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
So I'll give them credit for that. But I think to your point, if they stayed together long enough for my brother and my sister to be 18, 19, and 20 years old, I
Yeah.
think that would have had an impact on them because they would have seen it longer, as
Yeah.
well as when I returned to live back home with everybody, they divorced 2 years later. So I got that contrast because I went out into the world, I
Right.
saw peace, happiness, and rainbows.
Yeah.
Right? I came back and I was like, oh, it's worse. Right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's worse now, and then it ended. But if that went on for another decade, I may have probably just left again or try to figure things out. You mentioned something that I saw growing up as a child, where you mentioned like body and things like that, and with the rise of body dysmorphia in young adults
Mm.
and the impact from the comparison or maybe the friendly jabs, you're too skinny, you're too fat.
Yeah.
A lot of young girls go through that. You're
Mhm.
too skinny, you don't have enough muscles. A lot of young men go through that.
Mhm.
What are some of the challenges that you continue to see with young adults, children, when it comes to accepting their bodies and understanding their bodies?
Yeah, so that's a big one. I feel like it's more of like the body shame, right? So all of us were shamed at some level, if it was from our parents or if it was from kids in school. I always personally I've never really been skinny, skinny. Like I was always like middle to like, I did get made fun of for being fat in school. Now that I look back on like the fat part of being made fun of, I was like, I wish I looked that fat now. And it's like a joke now, but it's really deeper into like shame of like, and I could even say that it goes back generations of, what I would hear my mom, how she would talk to her body, and then mirror that to me of like, don't eat that. You can't eat at night. All those stories that like I hear in my mind that I'm like, these are not my stories. But I adapted them from hearing my mom or like looking at myself. I did a lot of mirror work. I still do. I think mirror work is really powerful of like looking yourself in the mirror and like listening to what you tell yourself. Consciously, you're not going to hear it, but then subconsciously of like when you're looking at other people. And it's really prevalent right now because like we have these little devices that you can literally see like anything and all these, if you want to be like a fit, skinny, in shape, whatever, I'm sure that's what you'll see everywhere. And it's kind of like that is mirrored to our reality of that body shame. And it really goes back to, for me, healing my body shame. I think that's also an ongoing journey. It's never like healed. It's always healing. Like I don't use the words like I'm healed. Like that's not even a thing I use because if I say that, I have said that previously and it's been shown to me that that is not true. It's another layer and it's like this spiral of like getting around one spiral of like, I feel like I can release that. And then here comes another lesson and then releasing that and releasing that. So it's like, again, just it's a journey. To answer your question, I feel like it comes back down to like the stories that we tell ourselves or the stories that our moms or her dads, like if this is a man saying this, like how did his dad talk to him? Or like, what did his dad instill in him as that I see that a lot too. And like my husband too, of like when his father wound pops up, of like the son loyalty and the husband loyalty, or, if it's a masculine figure, a lot of same thing with like single moms that raise kids. They might be more masculine because of that role that she had to play. She couldn't really show them her feminine side because of, having to be both people. I had a little bit of experience about being a single mom. My parents did help out. However, my sole responsibility was me. So I still had that responsibility part. I did have help with from my parents, but at the same time, it was more of like, them helping watch my daughter when I was at school or when I had to work, not school, but now of like sometimes I'm working now and it's like, Mom, I need you to pick my daughter, like I need you to pick Lily up from school, like that type of thing. So it's like going back to the body shaming. I feel like it is deep, and I don't think people realize that. And I think now more than ever, our generation is really conscious of we don't speak that way. We're kind, it's not tolerated, bullying and all of that. It's like it's really huge, but it's also taken very seriously. But I don't remember it ever being that serious when I was in school. Like, I would just suppress it. I wouldn't tell my parents, or, I would started to have these beliefs about myself that, like, now I'm looking back and I'm like, that was from when somebody called me, I remember now of like, oh, that was somebody on the bus called me fat. I like kept that story with me as an adult. So it's kind of like, it really goes back to understanding where that story came from and understanding, is that your real true identity, or is that a story that you told yourself? Like, beliefs are like lies. I mean, it has lies in it. Like, what beliefs are you telling yourself? Is it something that somebody else told you that you're, living in your reality right now as your own truth, versus is it something that maybe needs to be released, acknowledged, and released?
What role do you think external validation plays in the stories that young adults, children tell themselves?
I think it's a huge role, because, until you realize you have to validate yourself first, you're looking for validation outside of yourself. So that confidence and that, like like knowing who you truly are is, your truth, because we all have that within us. We just need to learn tools or understand, what's actually really happening through that self-validation or not self-validation. And then once you start validating yourself, I'm not going to say it's magic, but it feels like magic of like, I don't need somebody else's opinion. Like, we all have opinions. Every single person has opinions, and it's like, are you going to believe that opinion and make it your truth? Or are you going to figure out what your truth is and validate yourself before asking for validation from somebody else?
When it comes to our own truth, I struggled with that earlier on. And I think
Mhm.
the reason why I struggled with that is because one, I grew up poor. Two, I didn't have either of my parents. So
Mhm.
statistically, I was supposed to end up nowhere, right?
Mhm.
And three, I was not as I didn't have the muscle definition at that time, right? Because I was in my late teens. So that's something that a lot of men struggle with. It's like,
Mhm.
what is going to be my place in the world?
Yeah.
Right? I think that burdens on the shoulders of a lot of young men, where maybe young women have different burden on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So when I had to understand my truth and my story, I took a moment back and just asked myself, Train, what is it that you want to be?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to be what you want to be, or do you want to be what other people are telling you to be? So I took a moment. I was like, that makes a lot of sense at the time, because I was trying to be what everyone else wanted to be, and I was running into conflict, chaos, and drama wherever it is I
Mhm.
went. And I call my 20s the decade of misery, because everything happened. My parents divorced, my relationship ended.
Yeah.
I moved out. My relationship at the time was ending. And when that ended, she was manipulating my friend. So that was ending. So I was like, oh my God, I don't even
Yeah.
have a safe space. I don't have work. I don't have job, and I don't have the arms of my partner at the time.
Yeah.
But I survived it. And I think sometimes what happens with with children, teenagers, young adults, is that light at the end of the tunnel is so far ahead that
Yeah.
they lose hope. Do you see children, parents, families struggling with that when they're trying to make these changes? They're trying to break the generational trauma, the generational curse, the body shaming, the guilt. When they're presented with the light at the end of the tunnel, they're like, Lauren, Terrain, it just seems so far, and I don't know if I can make it.
Yeah. So I have like goosebumps when you're saying this. I wanted to honor you for, not taking that step back, because I think that that is really powerful when you're navigating your own life, navigating your identity, navigating parenting. And I think it's to me, it seems like you had that ambition and you had a vision of like what you wanted to build. Maybe you didn't know how it was going to be, but you just had that trust. And like that, when it comes to back to self-trust, um, specifically for me, I've had I had a very long journey of that, of through three different near-death experiences, all self-inflicted, through so many trials and tribulations of like, am I going to make it? Like, is this, what's my purpose? And like, just very similar to your story, I was asking everybody else around me of like, what's my purpose? Show me my purpose. I want to know my purpose, asking the universe, what's my purpose? All this stuff. And then somebody said really powerful words to me: you are your purpose. And I've had navigated so many different dark places and understanding different dark stuff through my, own healing experience, that I realized, okay, I believe that. Okay, so I'm my purpose. So now what? What ambition do I have? What vision do I have? Like, what do I want to build? Do I want to go work for somebody else the rest of my life and then like retire and then what? What am I going to do? Like, it's more of like, for me, I was like suppressing a lot, suppressing my ambition to make my parents feel better. And then it made me resentful. Or especially the one time I remember, I worked in the healthcare field. So I was a high risk OB ultrasound tech. Just in general, I was just a ultrasound tech. And then towards the end of my career, I was a high risk OB ultrasound tech. And this was right around the time that I filed for divorce, was going through the darkest part of my journey, that I realized when I tried to move across the United States to continue to run away from myself. Now, in hindsight, that's what I was doing, with me and my daughter, to Arizona. I'm in Delaware now, but at the time I was trying to move to Arizona, got a job up there, thought it was going to be good, and all of a sudden the universe was like, come back. So I had to come back to Delaware. And then I realized my mom had said to me, are you going back to work? And I said, no, I'm not. And, I did sell my house here in Delaware, so I had money to live off of. And I just at that moment was like, I know I have a higher purpose here, and I need to figure out what that is. Through a lot of different, trial and error, I was like, now that I got here, I realized, thank God I trusted myself enough to not really know how I was going to get there, but knew there was just like this little light of fire, this little hope, like you said, or this like passion inside of me, that I was like, I always liked helping people. Maybe it wasn't the best situations that I put myself in, but I always knew that I had something to give others. And now looking back on it, if I would have just listened to my mom, because it was always listening to my mom's fear, listening to my mom, or my dad, mom and dad's fear of like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're a single mom. What are you going to do? Like, and I'm like, I don't need to figure that out. Like, I don't need to know. And I just kind of, that's when my like self-trust journey kind of, you know, it was shown to me that the decisions that I made really kind of, I would make a decision and then I would kind of wait, like, oh God, when's shit gonna hit the fan? Like, but it didn't. And, of course there was, that's what it does, and it's, making sure, you basically stay on, going back to within myself of like, what's my purpose? How do I want to identify myself as? And, you know, building that way that supports my own nervous system instead of draining it like I used to do before, of like waking up. I used to love my job, waking up to the point that I would be like so mad and angry that I even have to go to work. And I'm like, what's going on? So it's kind of like the universe showing me that like there's more, and burnout, going through multiple experiences of burnout, of, you know, like physical burnout, to the point that I would be so sick that I couldn't even do anything. And it was kind of like that little nudge that I need to make this decision for myself so it can move me this way. I mean, was there fear? Sure. But I leaned into fear, like, I'm not going to let it control me. I think a lot of people, that financial fear, or like, what am I going to do? Um, healing that relationship with money, or healing the relationship with yourself, I think is um, really powerful, especially when it comes to self-abandonment, because we only really have ourselves. And I think I see a lot of people lately, especially what's going on in the world. It's scary, and change is scary, and it's okay for it to be scary. But as long as you know that you have yourselves, once you realize that, and once I realized that, At the end of the day, we don't need anybody else. We just need ourselves. And having all of that power within us, you don't need any other thing outside of you. You just need yourself. And I think that that was probably one of the huge life lessons through my near-death experience that I've learned that I don't need anybody else. I just need to be there for myself because I was self-abandoning myself, thinking that, running away from myself was the answer. And then realizing that's not. So I'm like, well, let's try something else. Let's try something else. And I kept learning these things that again, just being there for yourself and your nervous system and using that as like your nervous system as your home is probably one of the most powerful things through any experience, parenting, relationships, children, any of it.
That voice, the voice of fear in our heads, the voice of our parents, the voice of society's expectations, how can we minimize or even stop listening to that voice that seems so overpowering at times when it comes to listening to ourselves?
Yeah, so that's a good question because there's a truth voice, I call it, and also a fear voice. So it's understanding what it sounds like. So, and it's not good or bad. Our egos are there to protect us. It's the same voice that tells you don't run out in the street, there's a car coming, or don't go play with that bear in the woods, it's going to eat you. Like that, or don't put your hand on the hot stove, it's going to burn, it's going to hurt. That voice versus a voice that's like, oh God, don't go change your life. You're gonna die. Like literally that voice versus your truth that keeps coming up and keeps wanting to be seen of like it's usually a feeling of like I have to do something different, but I don't know what that is. That's more of like, and it's not coming from a place of fear. Um, versus, like ego stories. Like I call them ego stories. So you'll hear something lately. I'll hear something and I'll hear the voice and it's like, oh God, don't do that. Don't do that because it's uncomfortable or it doesn't feel good. And it's like, I know this will help me. Like I personally wholeheartedly know that this will help me, but that fear is like, don't do it because you're going to die. And the reality is I'm not going to die. you know, I'm just being vulnerable and it's uncomfortable. And expansion and change is uncomfortable for your ego. So I think that that is probably the easiest way that I can explain. Everybody knows what fear, maybe they don't know what fear feels like in a way of like trying to navigate, is this my truth versus is this my like ego trying to step in? But once you actually become aware of the stories that your ego tells you, you start to become more self-aware of like that passion piece of, I want to do this, I desire to do this, but then you have that you know, that story of like, but remember that one time that this happened, that, you're going to, if you change what you're doing, then you are, you're not going to be the same kind of thing. So I think that that's probably like the best way I can describe, that fear voice versus your truth.
From your perspective, how does guilt and shame impact the way we parent our children?
That's a good question. And I love this question actually because shame is kind of like it's a sneaky thing because once you kind of look and reveal shame of like I feel shameful, it's like a scared kid that just like runs away. And it's like, oh no, she sees me. Oh no. And then like underneath of that, there could be a story or an emotion. And then the same thing with guilt. And I feel like grief too is a huge one of anger. Like sometimes you feel anger, and then underneath that anger, it's like grief because of not doing the process of grieving. Or our society is like, if you work you work a 9 to 5 or you work for somebody else, you get 2 days off to like if after you lose somebody, and it's like, what the heck? Like, what is this? Who processes two things in 2 days? And I feel like then you're just suppressing it. It's not okay. You can't talk about it. You can't, and I feel like that really shows up to Specifically if I'm going to talk about my parents, my mom holds a lot of grief and guilt, and I feel that when she talks sometimes. And I feel like sometimes I'm the mom, and I have to remind her, hey, mom, it's okay to feel this way. I validating her frustration and validating that, like, she's doing this and like validating like things that she's feeling that maybe that's not my role or responsibility, but I know enough and I'm conscious enough to understand that maybe me just saying that to her will help her just like relax and not worry about it. She's a worrier, and so is my dad. So, it's like when they say something to me, my nervous system immediately is like, my God, you're back as in like this child mode. And I, again, am responsible for myself. So I am responsible for my nervous system. So understanding that maybe I can kind of help and give my wisdom that I have grown through to my parents and my own healing. I've seen it real time that when you heal seven generations forward and you hear seven generationals back. And that's why it feels so hard because you're healing things and your DNA and a lot that you're like, carrying in this book bag of like, heaviness. And you're like, little by little, it doesn't feel so heavy because you're allowing your body to feel things that like most generations weren't allowed to. And now in this generation, it's more socially acceptable and talked about, I should say, that you're allowed to do this. And um, I think that guilt, like, mom guilt, dad guilt, I think it's real because it's like all the stories that we've told ourselves or our parents have told ourselves, or especially men. I was just talking to my husband about this the other week that, men, society, especially like shame them for actually wanting to express emotions. And I believe that men, we all have masculine and feminine energy. It doesn't matter about your actual physical gender or what you were born with. We all have that energy that needs to be balanced inside of us. So, just like you're masculine, I'm feminine, we still have to balance energy inside of us because if not, we're too masculine or we're too feminine or we got this, like it's constantly like that separation. And I believe that we all come from the same source. So it's like we're all the same. We're just mirrors and we just look different. You physically look different, but we're all the same inside of us. And I think that once, and I think it's more prevalent now, but it's like that separation, the ego of like separating stuff. And it's like, we came down to earth to feel, and we have to feel the shame. We have to feel the guilt and like understand the story that's attached to it. And I think that is the only way that, because you're not going to ever like people run away from it, and it's like you can't run away from it. For prime example, I love to avoid stuff. My attachment style is a fearful avoidant. I understand, and it's like also understanding and healing that has created more of like a secure attachment with myself first, and then that ripples out to my daughter, my husband, my parents, everybody else that I come across around. And I think that understanding your relationship with shame, or when you feel shameful, instead of projecting it to be somebody else's fault, take accountability for your part, not all of it, because it's not all yours. But I think it's recognizing what part is and then releasing the rest.
I think some people, to your point, forget about that balance or they ignore it, the masculine feminine energy balance.
Yeah.
And you see it prevalent in so many different areas. So, for example, when you have like a family that's in harmony, you can see the balance in work, right? Like the woman, from a heterosexual perspective, the woman will make the man heart-centered, the man will make the woman mind-centered, and together they can create that healthy, harmonious dynamic within the household. But now, if you take it away from that, you say, let's say single parents,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
A mother who's trying to do it all, she's tapping into her masculine energy because she's in survival mode, for
Right.
example.
Yeah.
Single father, he may tap into his feminine energy because he's in survival mode, right? Like the mother, go, 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 survive, survive. I gotta pay all the bills. On the flip side, the man, and these are just perspectives from them. If the man will say that, okay, I need someone to help me. So in general, men are the ones who are the providers, but now he's in a role that he needs assistance. But it doesn't mean that either of them are in a bad situation. It just means that they're tapping into different energy. And I think sometimes we forget that men and women have masculine and feminine energy. It's just, where do you want to be living in? Are you surviving or are you thriving? Because when you're thriving, then you have a healthy balance. When you're surviving, and we've seen that, you're so much, you're so far one way that maybe you're neglecting something else. And then it shows up in your body as well. And we see the single parents, we see both parents who are so on the edge because they're trying to do it all. Someone give me the example of spinning plates, right? One
Yeah.
plate's the mom, one plate's the dad, one plate's the good worker, one plate is a good, the good social, good socialite. I'm still a parent, but I need to make sure I show up for all my friends' events. Well, you need to find the balance. What do you think is preventing maybe some parents from finding that balance, not only within themselves, masculine energy wise, or just energy wise in general, but within their household as well?
Yeah, so to your point too, I also want to say I've also seen through like working with, different people too, is they're in relationships that they have a husband or they have a wife or um who whatever their partner is not picking up the slack, or it's like they're doing everything, so they might as well just be a single parent, because that their body is just there. And it's like, well, saying different, like, I need you to do this is what I need, like needs wise, like of like not once, of like, this is what I need in this dynamic for it to stay healthy. And I also noticed that, especially if I'm going to talk about myself, that I wasn't stating what I needed. I would just do it all. Like I just would do it all until a point that I hit with like my husband, that I was like, look, I know that you provide and you're at work, but the moment that I wake up in the morning to the moment that I go to sleep, somebody needs me. If it's in my business or if it's in, if working with clients, if it's myself, if it's my daughter, if it's you. And I think that dynamic of like me speaking that and him, making him aware of that, of like, oh, okay. So like from her perspective, I go to work and I come home and I'm tired, but like I can do nighttime routine, or I can do, homework, or, not that he can do pick up and drop off, but like, like he can help otherwise, of like, she's just overwhelmed and tired. Cause that's all I kept hearing for a while, of like, oh, you're just always overwhelmed and tired. And then I'm like, you're right. I need to actually tell you why. And I'm listing all of this stuff, right? And then I'm like, it was such a like my body could be like, oh my God, he sees me, he sees us, but it was for a while that I would just, this isn't safe. I can't talk about this. I can't say this. And I think a lot of moms are, moms get it, and if single dads too, or if it's, you get it, because it's like, from our conditioning in childhood, you watched our mom do everything mostly. It was, she can't say anything. She just has to do it all. Like my mom was a full-time working mom. She didn't get to stay home with us. So, it was, they both worked. And, my dad after work wouldn't really do homework with us. It was always my mom, and she would always be tired, and go ask your mom. And she was always a disciplinarian. And then I'm like, I see it now that like she was just exhausted, like literally depleted. And you can't, from that place, even though my dad was physically there, emotionally and like disciplinarian and, provider, she also did that too because she worked and, she was the breadwinner of the family. So I can see how that lived on in me and my relationships to the point that it didn't anymore because I decided to shift it. So I think I wanted to say that piece too, to acknowledge the people that are in, relationships like that like use your voice, speak up, speak what you need, and like boundaries are super important because, you know, and I'm not saying that men are not like intuitive, but us women, usually feel things before it happens, or we usually feel when the energy's off. And you're responsible for speaking up for you. Don't just assume that your husband or your partner knows what you're going through, because masculine is the mind, body is feminine. So, he's going to be in his mind. Men, they have a hard time with being in their body because they don't know how to navigate it. So, it's like they have to learn. So I think that that is the biggest thing that I have learned, that I don't think people realize the masculine energy is the mind, but we need the mind and the body to work together. Or you can see where, if you're not, things aren't landing in your body, or you're not coming into your body and feeling it, you can see where that feminine energy is like, I'm here, but you're not acknowledging me. So I think that that is, I think that's like the best way that, if people just took whatever I just said and took like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like my body is feminine. Okay. My mind is masculine. And if you're always in your head and not in your body, you're going to start to see like patterns and like shifting out of that. Like people don't feel safe in their body, which is why things are the way they are. And if we stay more in our body of doing whatever it is that you want to do to be more in your body, if that is getting out of that relationship, or if that is being more conscious about, you know, whatever, if it's meditation or, yoga, or, whatever it is, like sitting in your body with yourself, you're going to start to get these answers yourself, and realizing that you really don't need anything else. I mean, of course, we all need mentors and we all need guidance and we all need that, but it's more of like you have to start with yourself first.
I absolutely agree. I think communication is the biggest part. We all are taught how to speak, but we don't know how to communicate our
Yeah.
feelings. And for the ladies out there, for the men out there, the ladies are, when they're in their feminine, they're heart centered. So you want your
Mhm.
partner to join you in that. Whereas the men now, we're mind centered, we're head centered. So
Yeah.
we get there, right? You don't feel well. When you tell us, we solve it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that's as old as time. But
Yeah.
if one person's not communicating, we don't know, because as a man in general, when I look around, I'm analyzing, okay, what is it that I can assist with? But if someone doesn't
Mhm.
tell me that they're in pain and we expect them to assume,
Yeah.
the the way men look at things is different. When men get together, ladies, is that we talk about our things. We say, okay, what's going on? You need a house built. You need this. What's Johnny doing? And you go on your way. When women get together, oh, I feel this. This show responded to me. And I'm generalizing here, but
Yeah.
that's
Please.
just in general the conversation. Now, if you were to split that, two women, two men, what's naturally going to happen? The women are going to speak together, the men are going to speak together.
Right.
But you want all four to come together and say, hey, this is how we get together. And this is why I like conversations like this, because you have Lauren's perspective. She's a woman. You have Trey's perspective. He's a man. And I think sometimes we need more of that type of conversation, because
Yeah.
it's easy for me to go and talk to my male friends about the problems of the world, and it's probably easier for you to go and talk to your female friends about the problems of the world. But when we get together, we're like, there's a lot of things happening, Terrain. This is what I feel. They're like, oh, I didn't look at it like that. And this is what I think. Oh, I didn't look at it like that.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of people coming together. And when I speak about people coming together, how important do you think it is to build that community of families
I
in
think
the
it
world?
is, I think it is so important. Like, so important right now, because especially with this divide that's happening, or it's trying to happen, like, it's when we're divided and we're fighting against each other, like whoever we are, then that's where the control can come in. And it's more of like, we're all the same. We just have different roles here. We have different paths, we have different missions, but we're all the same. And when we can look at one another like, oh, you're human, I'm human. Okay, great. Like sharing stories or being in community, I think is really important. Also, being individuals. So it's like you have, and also you have to be an individual first to be able to be confident to be in a community, or it's it can kind of, you can lose yourself because you're like, I don't even know who I am. And now I have to be in this community. And I think that it's really powerful for, what has been going on in the world, that like we're coming together more, like, and we are, especially like I love hearing people's perspective, and I love, listening to, like, I have mail, like I think lately it was probably a couple, like 6 months ago, I had got an email from a male guest, and he's like, do you men, do you allow men on your podcast? And I was like, of course. Like, as long as you're human, you could be on my podcast, like you can talk and have a conversation, because I like the perspective of the male perspective. You said the word assume, and I think that that is huge. It makes you look like an asshole and me look like an asshole when people assume, so it's like, let's stop making each other look like that, and then just be like, communicate, like, tell me how you feel. And I've really understood that recently with my husband, because I would assume what he was thinking because of his actions, and instead of asking him how he felt. And like, that was a huge, like, I didn't have to go to therapy we didn't have to go to like relationship therapy to, or marriage counseling, or whatever you call it, like, to understand that. It's just like, Lauren, you're not asking him how he feels. Start asking him how he feels and listen to what he's saying. And like, that has been huge when it comes to like relationships, because I just innately just thought, oh, I'm assuming how he feels. He's showing me this is what it is. And then I actually started verbalizing, well, how do you feel about it? And maybe he didn't know, but like, at least I'm acknowledging the fact that I care. And because I do, I do truly care about, how people feel. But like, my actions were not matching that, and I can see from his perspective of, it was actually a male that told me. We were on a call after we recorded, and I said, hey, I have a question. Told him the situation, and then he goes, just ask him how he feels. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then I, like, messaged him back, like, thank you so much. That's literally what I needed, because that's all he was asking. And he didn't know how to communicate that to me. Like, you don't ask me how I feel. Just like when a kid says, my daughter says, when she's mad at me because I don't let her do what she wants to do, she goes, you're mean. Instead of telling me, mommy, I'm mad, I'm mean. So in my, like in my head, I'm thinking, well, why am I mean? Like, I know that, it's more of like, oh, she means I'm mad at you. So it's kind of like, I feel like communication is huge. And like you said earlier, we know how to talk. We're taught how to talk and read and all that, but nobody really teaches us how to actually healthy, effectively communicate.
Lauren, let me ask you one final question before I let you
Sure.
go today. I
Yeah.
want to give you three wishes for this question. What are three things you wish people knew about the benefits of healthy communication in their relationships and why?
Oh, that's a good one. So my first wish is, I wish people knew how other people knew how to listen. So if you know how to listen to other people, you'll be a better if you know how to communicate effectively, then you'll actually be a better listener. So it's like, kind of like that saying where they say, like, listen more than you speak. But if you're always speaking, you actually miss what people are saying. So I think that's the first one. I think the second one is awareness. The awareness of how we communicate, or how you're communicating. And I think the last one is, I feel like this is together, responsibility and accountability. Like, what is your part in the communication that you are not accepting? And I think that, all of those three things is what